Hey everyone, welcome to Be Our Guest, live and in color's weekly virtual happy hour with industry professionals. I'm the artistic director of Live and in Color, Dev Janki. We are a not-for-profit theater company based in New York and Connecticut. We develop new plays and musicals that promote and celebrate diversity. For more information, check out our website, liveandincolor.org. To all our viewers today, I want to invite you to Live and in Color's virtual holiday extravaganza, 2020 Roasting on an Open Fire. So make sure to join us in celebrating the end of a crazy year on December 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, hosted by Broadway's Ryan Duncan and J. Elaine Marcos, featuring a slew of special guests, including Ku Verma, Orville Mendoza, L. Morgan Lee, and Honey Davenport from RuPaul's Drag Race, among others. It's going to be an amazing evening. You can get your free tickets now at liveandincolor.org. Now, grab your drink and start leaving questions for our guests in the comments. Get ready for a very exciting episode. Today, I have the privilege of talking to not one, not two, but three Broadway producers. Please welcome producer of shows such as Ain't Too Proud and American Son, Rashad V. Chambers. Hello.
Hi. How are you, Dev?
Producer of Jagged Little Pill and Raisin in the Sun, Vivek J. Tiwary.
Hey, Dev.
Hi, Vivek. Hey. And producer of Slave Play, Blair Russell. Hello. Cheers, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. How are you all?
Doing all right.
All things considered, doing well.
Yes. I want to know where all of you are tuning in from today.
I'm at my office down on Union Square here in New York City.
All right.
I'm in Astoria, New York.
Great.
I'm calling from the ancestral land of the Mexica in Mexico City, Mexico.
Oh my God, lucky you.
Hey.
Well, it snowed here today, just so you know. So very, very jealous. I am so excited to have the three of you here with me today. You're such an inspiration to so many people, and your work is extraordinary. I wanted to talk first about what inspired each of you originally to get into the performing arts. Just a little bit about how you found your way to producing. Rashad, you want to start?
Sure. I have a cousin who's an actress, so that was my initial introduction to the arts, just going to see her perform. And we grew up in Pittsburgh, and so my family just would go see her shows to support that and to support her. And I've always loved theater. I didn't want to be a performer myself, but I love the idea of taking something from page to stage. And that's sort of how I got into producing, that sort of curiosity about the business side of theater.
Yeah. Vivek?
Yeah, so I grew up here in New York City. I was born here. My parents were immigrants. Family is originally from India. So they did not work in the arts in any way, but they loved the arts. And literally, and they loved New York City. They loved this country and wanted to take advantage of everything it had to offer. And so ever since I was literally a toddler, my parents were taking me uptown. I grew up on 12th Street. So they were taking me uptown to see opera and ballet and Broadway shows and you know, all the wonderful, fine performing arts. And then as soon as I got old enough to be allowed out of the house on my own, I was going downtown to places like CBGB's and the Danceteria and La Mama. And I was seeing, early punk, early Sonic Youth shows and tail end punk rock shows. And experimental theater is what it was called back then.
Yeah.
And so it was just in a lot of ways my first love. And it's funny, like I look back on that and I realize, like, when I was a teenager doing a lot of those things, I was sort of, like many teenagers, I was that rebel telling my parents, like, you don't understand me, and like, thinking I was carving my own path. And now that I look back on it, it's like I am a product of my parents and the city I grew up in. It's like, and I was lucky to grow up in an amazing city and have parents who love the arts. And so it really is kind of that straightforward, but also that magical at the same time.
That's incredible. And Blair?
Yeah, my story is nothing like that. I grew up in Northern Virginia, where like there wasn't a lot of art or theater, and that wasn't really a career opportunity. But my parents were really into travel, and they wanted to make sure that we saw the world and saw different places. And so the first real exposure I had to the performing arts as a career was, and Dev, you'll appreciate this, my parents took us to Toronto, and we were there. We didn't really know what we were doing, but they decided to take me to see the Lion King, which was in Toronto at the time, the Princess of Wales. And I saw that show and I was like, okay, this looks real. Like, this looks like a job. Is this a job? Is this something somebody can do?
That's cool.
And I was young then, but I remember kind of keeping that in the back of my mind. It's like, I really want to do that. But as I'm sure people here had the same experience, I kind of had to like act like that wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was, and I knew it. And so that kind of inspired me.
That's wonderful.
For me, it was Starlight Express.
Rashad, what was your show that hooked you?
Dream Girls.
Yeah, well,
Nice.
that was it for a lot of people, I think. It's it's always amazing how our backgrounds are so different, and yet we all have this sort of same love. We've all sort of converged in this business. You both, all three of you, have such extraordinary lives, but we're here to focus more on your current work as producers. The big question I've posed to all of you, especially for people who are not in the business, is what does a producer do? And I know that that is a wide range, but I would love to hear from each of you just in terms of your definition of what a producer does. Anyone want to jump in?
Make a lot of calls and respond to a lot of emails.
Yeah, for sure. I try to tell people who are not in the business, it's almost like being a CEO of a company.
Yeah.
And, depending on what your role is in a show, there are two types of producers. There are, co-producers whose main responsibility is raising money, if you're working on a Broadway show, or if you are a lead producer or a general partner, you're kind of doing everything. You're working on the creative with the director and the designers, but you're also working on the financial aspects of raising money and figuring out, how a show is going to happen. So depending on where you are and what type of show you're doing, your role as producer could change.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent breakdown of a very difficult question. You kind of answered it perfectly and gracefully. Look, I mean, these days I focus on lead producing. I've certainly taken, along the career path, have had other producing roles, but these days I lead produce my shows. And, the way I sort of describe what that is I am a commercial producer. I love nonprofit theater and support many, but that's not what I do. I'm a commercial producer. So with that in mind, I always think that, like, really brass tacks, my job is twofold. One is to make money for my investors. As a commercial producer, that is part of my job. And then the other part of my job is to create an inspiring show that fans will be entertained by. To make sure the people who are coming into the theater that night have a really good time and walk out inspired, and also make money for my investors. That's kind of it, as a commercial producer.
Absolutely. And Blair, anything to add?
It's really about being what's needed. And, you know, when you start on a small scale show, sometimes that's like, I'm literally the one building the set. And then as the budgets grow and as the scope grows, where you're filling in depends on your specific talents and what's needed on a show. So it's about being a team player. I think when Rashad talks about being the CEO, it's like that. And sometimes it's like being a startup founder. You know, you're the one who really has to, you're doing everything at first. And then you start bringing on more people and they start to fill in the roles. And hopefully by the end, you're really overseeing the process and looking at the great team that you created. So. Yeah,
I think you really have to be like a person of all trades and be able to, you know, be adaptable, because you really have to be able to do so many jobs. I know for most people, the impression of a producer is Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane. You know, they think that that's what it is, but it's so much more. So all three of you, huge congratulations on all the Tony nominations for Slave Play and Betrayal and The Inheritance and The Jagged Little Pill. It's sort of a bittersweet season for that, because we're stuck here and we don't get to celebrate you and your work as much as you deserve, because the work has been extraordinary. Vivek, Jagged Little Pill, which is just incredible, was, there it is, in the middle of a very successful run at the Broadhurst Theater when Broadway shut down. What are the challenges producing a show that is on hiatus right now? It's sort of uncharted territory.
Totally. You know, it's fun, you know, echoing what Rashad and Blair said, you know, you really do whatever has to be done, you know, be a team player, be the CEO, keep things moving. Sometimes it's moving a very successful ship. Sometimes it feels like a startup. And this year has kind of been all of the above, really, you know. And the word that I like to use is nimble. I feel like you have to just be very nimble as a producer in our world, and never more so than this year. You know, I was in the very good fortune situation that Jagged Little Pill was a bona fide hit, you know, on both of the sort of, angles that I mentioned earlier. We were making good money, and we were also inspiring audiences. You know, we had fans coming out of the theater saying, like, you know, I want to, you know, make my world a better place, that it inspired me to get involved in these causes. And, you know, it was very gratifying in that sense. And then Broadway shut down, as you said. And so then I feel like my job as a producer shifted. I had to find ways to continue to take care of my fans, my cast, and my company without having a show running. You know, and so how do we do that? And we just have tried to find as many ways as we can. You know, this weekend on Sunday night, if I'll make a plug. As a producer, you also have to plug your projects. So Sunday night, December 13th, 8 p.m., we are doing a Jagged Little Pill live reunion concert. You know, we found a way to get the cast and the band back together on stage in very, you know, being extremely careful with COVID protocols. We've been quarantining and doing all the things we need to do to make that possible. But on Sunday night, we're going to have a reunion concert. And tickets are available. You can find the portal through jaggedlittlepill.com. It's in partnership with Stellar and Gold Star. And we're going to perform selections from the show. And that's been a way for me on a business level to put something together that there is a donation component. You know, we're giving we're raising money for RAIN as part of the evening. Sexual assault is a part of the show, which is why that makes sense for us for this event. We've done a lot of other fundraisers in the past. But it's a commercial venture, and I'm paying my actors and my band, and it's an opportunity for us to get some gainfully employed work to our team. So that was one of the reasons, but it's also a way for our fans to get to see us again. You know, and we found a way to just pull it off, and, you know, to do an actual live stream. So, you know, I never at the beginning of this year thought I would consider being a live stream producer a new skill that I would have, but that's a skill I've had to learn. You know, and we've learned along the way. Yeah, exactly. Here we are, right on this Zoom event.
Yes.
You know, earlier this year, we did an event that was all pre-recorded. You know, and people submitted their segments, and we put it together and put that on, you know, up. And I've learned how to move from that to this weekend, which will actually be live. It will be live in the moment. It'll be available for 48 hours after that. But tune in at 8 o'clock live. And so you've had to learn how to do those things, right?
It's definitely been a theme this year for everyone, just the pivot and the adjustment and the flexibility and us having to teach old dogs new tricks. I definitely, it's been a roller coaster of like, I don't know how to do this. Oh, I'm doing this. So
and accelerating all the things that are not new. We made a coffee table book, and let's get that out. Let's get that out now when fans are missing us, so they have something that they can remind them of the show. We've always talked about touring, and so we're accelerating touring because there are parts of the world and parts of the rest international and parts of America that are coming back faster than Broadway will. And so we're accelerating those efforts. And there may be a world in which Jagged Little Pill reopens internationally somewhere before it comes back to Broadway. I never thought I'd be saying that, but as a producer who's had to be nimble, is the word that I've used, we've had to think about those kind of things. So it's partially the normal things you think about, like touring, and partially new things like live streaming. And how do you do all of those things and just strategically schedule them in such a way that you're keeping your fans happy and you're doing the best you can to keep your cast and your band and your company as employed as possible.
That's incredible. I mean, I think the whole theater community, I've been so impressed with how everyone has adjusted, despite the challenging situation. And I always say artists are so scrappy. They'll figure it out somehow. Rashad, Yeah. Rashad, I want to talk to you. You're part of the Theater Producers of Color organization, which recently announced a tuition-free mentorship program. Can you tell us more about the mentorship and how about that whole organization?
Absolutely. I'm very honored to be a part of it. So it's not my brainchild, but I am the program mentor for it. It was founded by Miranda Go and a few other people. But the main mission is to be able to sort of create a pipeline to allow more producers of color to just learn about the business. Yes. And, I think that the producers that you have here are a handful of the producers of color that are on Broadway and in a commercial space. And as much as we love our jobs and as much as we love what we do, I'm going to speak for all of us by saying we don't want to be unicorns. We want there to be an abundance of us. And so Theater Producers of Color is going to help create that. And by not only giving these new producers access to the best of the best in the industry, they also get to do that for free. And that's amazing. And so it's starting out as a 10-week producing 101 program, and each week will be a different topic on what it means to put together a show and what does it mean to be a commercial producer. And so the program is now accepting applications until December 13th. And from those applicants, they'll be selecting 25 people to be in this inaugural program. And we're hoping to be able to do it again. And we're hoping to be able to do some other one-off seminars throughout the year on topics that we are not currently covering in the Producer 101 program. But I think it's going to be something that's really, really amazing and brings about change for the industry.
It's incredible. Yeah, so awesome.
Thank you.
Blair, you work with Show Shepherd as a theatrical consultant. Can you explain the work you do with them?
Sure. So Show Shepherd is a business that was started by my partner in the company, Matt Schicker, almost 10 years ago. And it was started because there was this need in the industry that was seen by commercial producers for shows in their sort of early infancy to have somebody who's sort of helping lead them through the steps. A lot of this knowledge, and another reason why I'm so excited by Theater Producers of Color, a lot of this knowledge is just information that you gain on the job or through experience. But there's a lot of work, there's a lot of information that you really just have to understand by somebody sort of sitting you down and be like, this is the way it's done. We know our industry is confusing and complex, and half of the time it's just, why do we do it this way? Well, because. And so at Show Shepherd, we really try to help people navigate that and navigate the system, because too often people sort of see a show and they think, oh, I can do that. And it's like, you probably can do that, but here's all of the things you need to know to get from point A to point B. So we try to be a support system for writers and independent producers in that process.
That's so incredible, because it's like nurturing a new baby, getting shows up, and a lot of time there's a lot of sort of business stuff along the way that just, especially with new work, people just don't know what they're doing. So it's so wonderful that you are providing this service. It's incredible. Rashad and Vivek, you both have your own production companies. Can you explain what a production company does versus what a producer on a specific project does?
Vivek, you want to start with that?
Yeah, and I should say, like, my company houses my producing efforts, so we don't do physical production.
Yeah.
We produce and run the show in much the same way that we discussed earlier, kind of what a producer does. But there is an element of production that is physical production that actually like coordinates hiring all the staff and that also overlaps with the world of general management, but that's not what I do. I really focus on creative development and production of my shows.
It's pretty similar for me. I'm sort of a one-man show, but depending on the project, I may have a producing partner, and then accompanying that with the GM. That's usually how we build off the productions. But I would say internally, it's just sort of development. And then once we get to the phase where we're actually looking to put on a show, we're doing a little bit of outreach to bring other people on to help bring that show to life.
It's wonderful. Blair, you produced the incredible Slave play by Jeremy O. Harris on Broadway this past season. It was such an important work. What was the experience and the experience with the success of this vital piece for you? What was, it just was so, it was a big deal.
Yeah, I was just really grateful to be invited by the team. It was led by Level Forward, 9 Stories, and then of course Greg Noble and the Seaview production team. I've known Greg for a long time, and he invited me to see the show when it was off Broadway, and I saw the show and I was like, okay. And like I had to sit with it for literally 6 months before I could even think about how I felt about the show. But the fact that I was thinking about it so much told me everything I needed to know. So when he said, okay, we're going to Broadway, I was like, absolutely, yes, 100%. I didn't even think about like what it would entail for me to kind of get my first co-producing credit. At the same time, I had just started to look at projects that I wanted to develop myself. And so I said, like, okay, I'm going to reach out to 3 writers I know, ask them if I can produce their show. They're all going to say no because I'm new and I've never done it before. So I emailed them all, and all 3 of them say yes. So now I'm like, I have 3 shows and I have a Broadway show that I'm raising for. So I went from like thinking I was going to be a producer to like being a producer in the span of a few weeks. The magic of that show is, we're in a moment right now where we're talking a lot about how we produce, how we treat our actors on stage, how we treat people backstage, what our process is like. And those conversations happened when we were producing Slave Play. And I have to hand it to the team, because we were thinking forward. We were thinking by including our playwright on the producing team and like really listening to his voice in regards to how we're going to produce the show. One of our first days of rehearsal was the producers and the cast and the crew and the designers all getting together and doing anti-racist training, like something that I don't think has ever happened on a Broadway show before. And we had our blackout nights, again, another kind of history-making moment. So from beginning to end, we were having these conversations, the ones that are important to me. And I was just really grateful to be involved and to be able to have that experience. I sort of laugh, and not anymore, because I was like, oh, okay, I've produced this show. If I never get to produce another show, I'll be happy. But then Broadway said, and I was like, just kidding. I really want to produce another show. Please come back.
Yeah.
I think all 3 of you have produced such provocative and smart, and I feel like all the shows the 3 of you have produced have sort of moved the the genre forward in really amazing ways. You know, theater is a risky business, and you have to sort of take a leap of faith. I know producers see massive hits, and then they see massive losses. We spoke a little bit about this, but what do you do when a show isn't succeeding as you want it to be? Does anyone want to?
Just real quick, one thing I learned about myself as a producer, because before becoming a co-producer, I've invested in shows, right? To sort of start understanding the documents and the landscape. And when I've invested in a show and I really, really cared about the show and really liked the show, it's like you just want to be a cheerleader and a supporter and do everything you can to make it a success. And then when I've invested in a show that I haven't cared about that much and it hasn't been a success, you're sort of like, oh yeah, like that one hurts more than the other one, because, you know, the other one hurts your heart and that one just makes you feel bad because you're like, well, I wish, you know, you just want to see the work on stage. You just want to see it produced. You just want an audience to be able to see it, and you want people to connect with it in the way that you connect with it. So it doesn't feel great, but I'm still always proud of getting the work there, even in the first place. You just want it to make some money so you can return, like Vivek said, to your investors.
I agree with that. And I think, you know, the business is so hard. Most shows don't recoup or make money. But it's about the experience, and it's about being able to create something that's special. There, you know, different investors get involved with different shows for different reasons. Some people just want to touch the hem of a star. Some people want to put forward a groundbreaking subject matter. You know, it really just depends. But for me, it's about also creating a good experience for the investors on the show, because if you do that, even if they lose money, they'll be likely to come back to you. But the first thing for me is believing in what you're producing, because then if you do that, you won't have as many regrets about the money that's lost, because there is no guarantee. If we can all figure out how to do it, we'd all be rich, right? But it's about believing in something. Sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't, but it doesn't mean that show shouldn't happen. It just means that, you know, it wasn't going to be a commercial success, but maybe you pick that money back up on the tour, or maybe in licensing or something like that. But for me, it just comes down to believing in the vision of the show, and also creating that experience for everyone involved.
Vivek, anything to add to that?
Not really. You know, I mean, I think you guys covered it.
We started talking about this as well. You know, there's a complete lack of representation of BIPOC producers on Broadway, and I think we're all working towards changing that. The three of you are really trailblazers in regard to this. Who did you look up to in the business when you were starting out, and who are your mentors, and who did you learn what you do from? Anyone want to jump in?
Vivek, go ahead.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, you know, I mean, the specific, the sort of very direct answer to that question is the very first show I worked on was Mel Brooks' The Producers. And I had a very, very, very small, you won't see my name in the credits anywhere. So I was not a producer of that show per se, but I did raise a little bit of money for it. And I told some of the lead producers, like, look, what I'm trying to do here is really learn. And to give them their credit, and in particular, I have to give props to Steve Baruch. You know, I said, what I want to do is just be able to come to meetings and read documents and just learn how the process, and, you know, shadow you at moments and just learn how it works. And they let me do that. And so that really was the show that I learned the ropes from. And I was very fortunate to have for that show to have had a lead producing team, in particular Steve Baruch, who were willing to let me do that. And I will say, for my part, I really did kind of like keep my mouth shut and my eyes and ears open and learn, you know. And I think that we are, for the most part, a pretty welcoming industry. And I think that if you see people who genuinely want to learn and aren't running their mouths about things that they don't know, you know, that you'll find, more often than not, you'll find somebody who will say, sure, come in and learn, you know. So that's kind of how it started for me.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I wasn't really looking up so much as I was like pulled along and pushed forward. Just to be real, like there wasn't really somebody that I was looking at and saying, oh yes, that's the person that I want to be. And there wasn't anybody looking down at me and saying, hey, you come along, we're going to make this happen. But there were a lot of people who I respected, who respected me, who, you know, I told them what my dream was, and they were saying, I don't know how you do that, but I'm going to help you. I'm going to push you forward. Working with Greg, again, like I met him when he was coming off of Gentleman's Guide. He was like 23 and I was 24. And I was working at Goodspeed Musicals at the time. And I remember thinking, first when I heard about him and met him, I was like, that guy, like whatever, you're going to have a Tony before, like, and be younger than me. And then I was thinking, that's the person I need to be friends with. So it was just a call to him. And he said, okay, well, here's a show, like, let's figure it out. And then I worked with Donalyn Hilton at Goodspeed Musicals. She was somebody who sort of supported the beginning of my producing career by just letting me into the office. And so then when I said, okay, I'm going to go try to do this in New York City, you know, those people were the ones who were either pulling me or pushing me and saying, yes, do it, and figure it out. And a lot of it, I just kind of figured it out by trying it. And, you know, as far as like looking up to producers of color, like Rashad said, it's a really small group. And I realized, I was talking to another producer of color like 2 months ago, and I was like, oh, I've never actually talked to an older Black man in the industry, like somebody who's actually talking about producing and like the topics. And I literally just like had a moment where I was like crying because I was like, oh, this has never happened before to me ever. Mm-hmm. And that was that realization was shocking. So, you know,
yeah, that's truism. I mean, that is a truth.
Yeah, for sure. When I first started learning about producing, I really just tried to dive in and just learn as much as I could about theater in general, because I was a theater nerd. So it started out with me just wanting that foundation first and foremost and doing the research, which I think a lot of people don't do these days. But, you know, I you know, knew about theater, but then I also would work in the box office and be a house manager and do stage crew and all these other things so I can learn all the different departments. And then when I started doing research, I sort of looked up to people like Kevin McCullum or Jeffrey Sellers who were doing original work. And that's what I wanted to do. There were no people of color to look to really until probably Stephen Bird and Aaliyah Jones Harvey did Cat on the Hot Tin Roof in 2008 was the first time that I saw someone that looked like me being a lead producer on a show. So then I just followed everything that they did. But I would say the two people that really held me down and nurtured me as a producer were two people I consider mentors, Jason Raitt and Greg Shafford, who are just the sweetest guys and would deal with my shenanigans when I would write to them and say, I have this idea, can we meet, can we talk? And they would always just be there to support me. And I spent about 10 years of my early career just developing shows, optioning things, doing readings, doing off Broadway, doing concerts, leading up to my Broadway debut. But those were the two that were just so instrumental in my nurturing it.
Yeah. Well, and now you are that for many other people. This is sort of again a big question that we're all working towards, I think. As a community, how can we foster a more inclusive future for Broadway? I you know, that's the question we've been asking for a while, but I would love to know what your number one or two things are that you think will help move us forward.
We have to open the door and hold it open. That's very true. But we also have to think about what it takes to get to that door. And, you know, what Rashad is building with Miranda and the team at Theater Producers of Color, like that's the actual education that people need to understand how any of us are doing this, because I would love it if the job was like just money bags on the table and cigars and whatever, but it's not that. It's like really slow, steady, consistent pressure and putting yourself in a position through whatever your day job is while you're trying to become a producer, or what, you know, whatever you're doing, so that you can have that exposure, so that you can meet people. Having a creative idea is great. Knowing writers and actors is great, but there's a much larger picture, and whatever we can do as producers to help people who are looking, and they're like looking at the door and they don't quite know what it takes to get from here to there. Those are the pathways that I think we need to open up. So I love initiatives, I love committees, but I think it's really any effective change is going to come from someone saying, hey, you want to do this? Okay, this is what the pathway looks like. You still want to come down it? Great. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. No, I was going to say, I would even add like one step before that, not just like, oh, this is what you want to do, here's how to do it, but also like educating people of color is what you can do. You know, like here are the various positions, you know.
Absolutely.
On one hand, absolutely, we need to, when we are staffing our shows and our projects, make sure that inclusion and diversity is front of mind. Absolutely, there is that, right? But for some of these positions, there actually is a pipeline issue. And it is very difficult to create a successful piece of theater. I mean, it's just so insanely hard, right? And so you do your best to fill those positions with the best people that are out there. And as much as I hate to say it, there are certain heads of staff for which the best people doing it are not people of color, because people of color haven't even known that that's a thing, right? There are some departments for which there is a pipeline issue. There are no good people of color or any people of color doing that. So what we need to do is mentor those people. And part of it is like, they may not even know that music contracting is a thing, that there is a role of somebody who puts the bands together. And that's a really cool thing to do. And somebody may, you know, a young kid of color may not realize that that's an option for him, her, or them, you know? And so it starts there. It starts letting the world know, here are the various positions. There are a number of them. I mean, it takes a village to create a successful Broadway show. So start by letting the world know, you know, the community know what positions exist, and then mentoring them, you know, because there really are some positions for which people of color don't even know that that's a path they should be taking.
And the mentoring part, it's really so much about someone being able to look at someone, their personality, their background, and say, you would be good at this. Because like nobody is going to become and be a music contractor. Like it's just not, it's not going to happen that way. Right. It's probably like, that's the kind of job that's just passed down because you say, hey, come try this, right? So building that pipeline is not like you had to go to school and learn how to be the associate company manager or something. It's just like, okay, I know you're doing this. I know you're a performer. I know you're a musician. Have you thought about this? And that's how you start to build it. Because I'm only a producer because somebody said yes to me, even when I had no idea what a producer did. I only stage manage because somebody said yes to me, even when I had no idea what a stage manager did. But you just have to look at somebody and say, hey, you could fill this space.
But we need communication and we need awareness, because as Vivek was saying, there are a lot of people who don't even know that you can be in this business outside of being a performer. So for me, like, as much as I don't like limelight, if I can be able to talk and share my story and allow somebody to see like, oh, I can make a business, you know, I can make a living in this business, I think that that's very inspiring, because representation does matter. And the fact that when I was thinking about producing, I could not pinpoint one person of color that looked like me is a problem. And we also have to remember, as we become veterans, to give back, to reach back and also mentor people. A lot of times people of color, because we don't have the same, you know, access and avenues, we're just hustling to just have our own come up, you know? But we have to also remember to take that time to answer that email or have that coffee with someone, just to share and be able to allow them to see what is possible. And I think if we do all those things, and not just producers, but stage managers, company managers, casting directors, if we can really do that, change will come bit by bit. And that's what I hope this sort of movement is doing, is being able to change the landscape and be able to bring about more opportunities.
Wow, I love everything all three of you said. It's really so inspirational. It's the pipeline, the mentorship, all of it. I always say, like, I feel as people of color, especially in leadership positions, we don't get the opportunity to fail in order to practice and get better and build the muscle. So just all the work that you're talking about is about lifting up, educating, making sure people succeed at what they do. So I thank you for that. It's really wonderful. Another big question. What do you think theater is going to look like once we are able to reopen?
That's a good question. That depends on where the theater is.
Yes.
Because if it's in, Korea, then it's looking great.
Yes.
But I think, in seriousness, it depends on, I think at this point, the comfort level of people and when a vaccine is, prevalent. But I do think that it's going to come back stronger than ever because people there's a need and a want for it. The arts is one thing that kind of goes to the wayside when funding gets cut, but it's a thing that we all need, and it kind of holds a mirror up to society. So I think that it'll be a slow start, but in the next year or so, I think we'll be back up and running.
I agree with that 100%.
I really hope like the face of it looks similar, maybe bigger. I want us to have the strength that we had before. I want us to speak to audiences the way we did before. And then I want everything behind that face to look a little different. I want to see that there's more people of color, and we can call it behind the scenes, but it's more than that. It's behind everything. I want to see that we're thinking of new ways of putting shows together and getting them out there, new avenues for our work. So I still want us to have that real strong brand of who we are. We're all commercial producers working on Broadway, so we want that strong face, but we just want there to be more, and we want there to be abundance, and we want there to be more people in the industry. So I Broadway will come back, and for the tourists coming into the city, it probably won't look that different to them, but we'll know that it's really different on the inside, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. We're kind of getting out of time, but I think we have a few questions before we go. Let's see. Matthew Cullen says, Rashad mentioned research. Where or how would you recommend beginning the research?
Good question, Matthew. Well, when I was in college, I read Playbill. I started reading playbill.com every day, and I still do that every morning while I'm having breakfast. And I think it's a great resource to just be able to learn about theater, who comes before you, Broadway.com, Broadway World. I do believe there's another publication called Broadway Briefing that sort of summarizes all the major highlights in theater. Those publications are really great places to start for research.
Fantastic. Let's take one more. Let's see do we have one more? Elisa says, how do you balance the creativity and financials for a project? Thank you so much.
Quickly, I try to serve the projects as they come to me. And, I think we were talking about how different producers have different roles and different purposes. And I think some people can, Vivek, you're probably, I know you to be somebody who can really kind of ideate on a project and the large scale and then put the teams together. And I'm kind of somebody who's like sneaking around and I find something, I'm like, yes, I like that. I will take that. So I'm always leading with that. And I'm always leading with like, okay, this is the project that I found. How can we safely make this little gem that I found? How can we clean it up, buff it, and then put it out to the world in a way that it's going to return for us? So I'm always trying to serve that. The balance is hard, but I think financials can also, creativity and financials are not necessarily like in opposition to each other, because sometimes it's the business side that starts to make the financials go out of control, not the creativity, because somebody says, well, if we do this, it'll make more money. And if we do this, and it's like, no, we can shape it and be a little bit, we can stick to what the creative is and let that serve us. So
anyone else want to chime in?
Sometimes you're forced to be more creative when you don't have the money. So, that's where it all comes. It just really comes down to the vision and how can we make the best art and still be able to possibly make money.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this question that you're asking kind of is the question behind what we do, right? And I would say the first thing is just recognizing that is a question, that there needs to be a balance. It is often the best way to approach the issue. I grew up loving punk rock, right? And I was a producer on American Idiot, on the Green Day musical. And to bring a punk rock sensibility to Broadway was a dream. There's a reason that it was done with Green Day and not with Husker Du, because Green Day is a much better known band that has a large built-in international fan base, and the tourists will come to New York and want to see the Green Day musical, and a million other reasons, and so you just have to think about that. Think about what is your creative goal and recognize that you have to balance it financially, and how do you do that? And sometimes that leads to difficult decisions, and sometimes it leads to really awesome creative thinking. You want to bring a punk rock show to Broadway. What are the bands that I can do that with? Sounds like a pretty fun brainstorm, right?
Yeah.
But some will make sense and some won't. So it really is just recognizing that there's a balance and being really smart about how you approach that balance.
That's great. I think we have time for one more question.
And by the way, a Husker Du musical would be amazing.
It sure would. Presley says, difference between producing a Broadway musical versus a play, and between producing film and TV.
I mean, a musical is constructed. A musical is like trying to, flying an airplane and building it. It's trying to make a whole housing development. Like it's really about putting the pieces together. And sometimes plays come pretty fully formed. Maybe you're changing the cast, but a musical takes so many more people to make it happen, that as a producer, when you're doing a play, you can really focus on like, how are we best serving this piece of art? Casting, artwork, what's our marketing look like? When you're doing a musical, your job is helping and supporting so many people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean this should probably be a whole panel discussion.
Exactly.
They're all completely different ways of producing. And even I noticed in your question, you said like film/TV. Well, they're film and TV are totally different.
Those are different too. Yeah, I mean, especially when you're looking at theater in general, you work very hard for rehearsals and readings and workshops, and you have 4 weeks from 10 to 6 every day to sort of get it right, and then you have previews. Whereas a film, I'm going to leave TV out, but a film, you can do everything in a couple weeks, and then you could spend a month, 2 months, a year editing and in post-production. So just the level of work is different. Some of it on theater, I kind of look at it as on the front end, and on camera, it's on the back end. So they each have their own skill sets.
Maybe we'll do a whole nother show on it eventually.
You definitely could.
We are out of time. The three of you are extraordinary. Thank you for joining me. Before we go, I want to remind everyone to please reserve your free ticket to Live and in Color's virtual holiday extravaganza. 2020, Roasting on an Open Fire. It's going to be so much fun. Get your tickets at liveandincolor.org. Also, be sure to tune in to be our guest next week, when I will be talking to the star of Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, Hamilton, and Wicked, Shobha Narayan. She's extraordinary. It's going to be an amazing conversation. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. If you like what you heard tonight, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interviews with industry professionals. Thank you, Rashad, Vivek, and Blair, for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Vivek, would you lead us in a little toast before we go?
Yeah, I'm going to say here's to 2021. May it be a year of return, a year of old dreams realized and new dreams defined.
Hear, hear. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Come on and change the scene. future looks bright. Change